Welcome to my podcast. My name is Brett Lovins. This episode, we will further delve into recovery-ready or recovery-friendly workplaces. Recently, the White House released a much-anticipated recovery-ready workplace toolkit. There are several states that have already released similar kinds of documentation that are basically a recipe for how businesses can, include and destigmatize and normalize the conversation of substance use disorder in order to potentially help employees find their way to help and understanding of their condition, sooner than some of us who knew nothing and just sort of plodded along in a very lonely place. And, this idea that the workplace can be a big positive place to make changes and to include those of us that are in recovery, because many of us are quiet. So anyway, the White House released that, and it's so cool because I had gotten to know this woman named Janet Hadley, who has done something similar already. She's built a framework, a curriculum, basically an accreditation for businesses to use to do these things. And she and I laughed during the podcast how similar it is to the White House's recipe book, if you will, toolkit. And she's so anyway. Janet Hadley is my guest, and she's amazing, and what she's built is amazing. And once again, finding my way into this space of employment, the workplace, for normalizing and destigmatizing. So hopefully you enjoy the conversation, and let's roll it. Well, it is morning for me, and it is evening-ish for you.
Yeah.
Both on a Monday. I'm really stoked to have my friend Janet Hadley here. Janet, there's a lot of ways to do this, but I find that one of the best ways is just to let my guest introduce themselves to the audience. Would you be up for doing that?
Yes. So I am Janet Hadley. I live in the UK with my husband and my 3 children, who are actually 18 now, so they're not really children. I own a company called Choose Sunrise, which is founded on the belief that nobody should feel afraid to ask for help with alcohol use. And clearly, the reason why I founded that company is because I was afraid to ask for help with alcohol use. And I don't want other people to feel the way that I did. And that's me.
Yeah. And you have a podcast as well that I've been listening to it. It's fabulous. So,
thank you. Yeah, Professional Drinkers, if you want to look it up.
Is that the greatest? And then what's your tagline for your company as well, which I love as well?
Yeah, we're creating an alcohol-safe workplace without killing the buzz.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's 100 ways to go here, but just because of that, let's just tee off on your tagline for your company. Like,
sure.
I think a lot of times that people that hear about people like us that are advocating for, you're using the words alcohol safe workplace, there's a lot of ways to frame it up. And I would have been this too, without killing the buzz. I think that's beautiful, because a lot of people are under the well, I'll let you answer this. Why do you say without killing the buzz? Because it's beautiful.
Well, we are definitely not the fun police, and there's this kind of perception that sober people are going to be boring and evangelical, whereas actually most sober people have had a huge amount of drinking in their lives. They are the people who will tell you the best drinking stories, hence the Professional Drinkers podcast. They will tell you stories that will make you hair curl. And if you think that this group of people are going to be boring, then you need to think again. They have partied so hard that they've finished their partying a little bit earlier than most people and have decided to hang up their party shoes and do something else. But what they are also brilliant at is helping spot people who are starting to run into trouble with their own alcohol. And that is a really lonely place to find yourself. And if you're a take it or leave it drinker, you can have a drink and stop. You probably don't really understand what it's like being someone who can't stop. And it's just awful. Like, it is so difficult to live your life knowing that well, you've got this event coming up and you're going to drink because everyone's drinking, and you just know that you're going to lose control. And you know that the next day you're going to wake up and not know where your phone is and not know what you say to your boss. And you can't do anything to stop it. You've tried all these different rules. You've tried drinking different drinks, drinking water between the drinks. I don't know, only like taking little sips. You've tried drinking beer instead of wine. You've tried drinking gin because you don't really like gin, and none of it works because the minute the alcohol hits your system, it switches off your decision-making ability. All your good intentions go out of the window, and before you know it, you've woken up and you think, I've done it again. I really wish I could stop doing this. I hate myself. Why can other people drink normally? And this cycle, it's devastating. And people live like this for years. And what sober people can do is notice when that's happening and help those people to find a different way of living much sooner than we did. And that's what we want to do. We want to help people, really. It's very altruistic. It's not the fun place.
Yeah, thank you for painting that picture. I often get a fair bit of levity going in the tragedy of what I lived. I can find humor in it now, but when I'm in the middle of it, it is not funny.
No, it's
and,
not.
And it's terrifying. And the use case that you just painted there, I'm going to add a layer onto that as well, where a lot of people like myself don't even go to those situations and at all, and have stashed all their stuff in their hotel room so that they can go back up there and just absolutely do a number on myself. So that was a reality for me when I would go to corporate events too, because I wasn't interested in one or two. Yeah. And if I could find my people that drank like me, all the better. But I mean, there's an isolation here that is really rough.
Yeah. Yeah. I can remember sort of having to kind of control my drinking for several hours while I was out, and then just being like, I can't wait to get home and drink a whole bottle of wine on top of everything I've had or whatever. I just about keep a lid on it till I get home, and then I can drink properly. Yeah.
It's like wine, a wound spring.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're good at hiding it.
It is possible to recover, right?
Yes.
You don't have the wound spring anymore. We're not the fun police, as you pointed out, right? We can attend these events. But you're in your work, I think you're trying to make space for people like us that have found their way, that have used up all their drink tickets, and have found their way to a new way of life, have discovered that if they don't ever take the first drink, then they won't have that happen to where they lose control.
Yeah. I think for me, I listened to a lot of advice that I didn't realize that it was being put out by the alcohol industry. So I used the DrinkAware site in the UK, which is fully funded by the alcohol industry, but I didn't know that. And I used to use their app to try and track how many units I was having. And their advice, the first thing I read on their website was, it might be easier to try cutting back than it is to stop drinking altogether. And I was like, oh, thank goodness for that. I don't have to stop. And that must have kept me stuck for about 5 years, because I tried so hard to moderate, and all this advice on the website made it sound like it was possible. Now I know it's funded by the drink industry, and it is subtly worded to keep you trapped, and it's just wrong. And the reality is that if you're struggling to moderate, none is going to be so much easier for you than just a little bit. So much easier. When you're selling an addictive substance that switches off your ability to make sound decisions, it's very irresponsible to tell people to just moderate their use of it. I mean, it's like asking, you probably don't know who Mr. Kipling is, do you? This is a UK cake brand. It's like asking Mr. Kipling to stop you from eating too much cake. No, it's just not good advice from those guys. So I'm very vocal about my opinions on the DrinkAware website and their drink responsibly message that they put out.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Well, you and I, we just there's one thing right there that our stories are similar. I know exactly how long I tried to moderate for. It's 7 years for me.
Yeah.
The beginning of the moderation occurs when I moved to a different location. So I know exactly when I decided, you know what, I probably need to moderate. And it was a 7 year, it was awful.
Yeah.
Failure after failure after failure, self-deprecation to the max, not understanding that my willpower, and yet one drink in. And not only that, to resist that first drink was just this side of impossible, elevated heart rate, wound spring feeling. So moderation for people that can moderate.
Yeah. Fine.
Two thumbs up. Two thumbs up.
Yeah.
But tell me more about what it's like to be in this condition and trying to moderate.
Well, you just feel an enormous sense of failure. And you can see that other people can do it and that you can't. And the assumption is that there's something wrong with you. Now, the reality is there's nothing wrong with you. One of my big turning points was when I started to educate myself about how alcohol actually works and realizing that it wasn't my fault. I was like, it's actually a very natural reaction when you put a substance into your system that creates, these endorphins and these happy feelings. You are going to want to do it again and again. That's completely normal. That's actually your brain behaving how it's meant to behave. It's meant to chase highs. It's meant to chase things that make you feel good. When I was trying to moderate and not being able to, I thought there was something wrong with me. But now I realize that there is nothing wrong with me, and there is a lot wrong with marketing addictive substances. And don't forget, alcohol has been marketed to you since the day you were born. It's probably on your favorite sports team shirts. It's on billboards everywhere. It's in magazines and newspapers. It is on TV. It is, every crime drama has like a high flying cop who drinks whiskey every evening but never has a hangover. And there's close-ups of alcohol in all films. It's glamorized. It has beautiful labels. It has uplighting in the bars. It's put on a pedestal, literally glamorized. And we are told that we need it. We're told we need it to socialize. We're told we need it to have fun, to be in a relationship, to commiserate, to celebrate, everything. You need alcohol at every occasion. And it is so ingrained into our society that when you run into trouble with it, you feel like you are the only person this has ever happened to. And because it's so stigmatized to talk about it, you don't know anyone else. And the reality is you're surrounded by people who are having the same issue. You are surrounded by them. And if you are able to take that first step and reach out and ask for help, there is this underworld of sober rebels who will welcome you with open arms and bring you into the fold and show you that you can have the most wonderful, magical life without any alcohol in it whatsoever. And if only I'd found them sooner. And that is what I want to bring to workplaces. Help people to just catch sight of the fact that, yeah, you might not have ever had a sober role model and you might not ever have considered stopping drinking completely, but, just maybe it might be possible for you. And instead of feeling like, well, my life will be over and I'll never have any fun ever again, maybe your life might actually get better.
Yeah, which was a terrifying prospect for me. Can I, that tripped me up for a long time too, is, well, maybe, but what about, and fill in the blank.
Yeah.
What about the trips? What about Thanksgiving? What about, I can't do
weddings.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can, and it's actually quite easy.
It's quite easy. Yeah, it is. It's not easy at first, but it is quite easy in the end. And, I think forever is a really difficult concept when you're a drinker to think about stopping forever. So, one of the things that we advocate at Choose Sunrise is we do this program called 101 Days to Sober. And I really believe that 101 days is about the right amount of time for your brain chemistry to start to recalibrate and for you to start really feeling a lot better, and a lot of the benefits of not drinking. And I always say to clients that they can go back to drinking at the end if they want to, but nobody ever wants to because we do the work with them as well. You know, we do the work on mindset and we do the work on nutrition and understanding what it was that was keeping them drinking in the first place, because it's not really always about the alcohol. It's about whatever they're trying to escape from with the alcohol. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Let's talk about Choose Sunrise. So I found you on LinkedIn. I'm
Yes.
slowly but surely finding all kinds of people that are doing work in this space of trying to make a difference in the workplace. And, you know, you commented on a podcast I did with Maureen Nelson, who's another woman that I just think super highly of. And as what often happens with people in this work, I know very little about your background and we're fast friends. That's typically people in recovery, right? It seems to be go from zero to, hey, we're friends because we've experienced the same thing before.
Agree. Yeah.
And your work is fascinating. And I've read some of the things that on your website. I've watched a few things on YouTube. I listened to a couple of your podcasts. You know, why don't I give you the floor to kind of tell why you did what you did and what there's several things that I think are unique about it, but I'll tee you up to say whatever you think are unique about it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess the story goes that I stopped drinking in 2020 during lockdown, and I had to tell people at work when lockdown ended because everyone was having these crazy drinking sessions of meeting back up again in the office. And I would have been the ringleader of that. I would have been the person who was out till 4 a.m. buying rounds of drinks for everyone. And of course, because I was not drinking, I had to tell people, why not? That's the problem with being a party animal. Yeah, it's quite obvious when you stop drinking. And I wasn't really ready to tell people, but I kind of had to. And some people were a little bit like, well, what do you mean you're not drinking? You know, you're the life and soul of the party. Oh, come on, can't you just have one? And I found that actually what I had to do to get them to stop saying that was to tell them a bit more of the truth about why I wasn't drinking, and that it was actually really affecting my mental health, and that I was really proud of my decision to stop drinking, and that I felt a lot better. And then they back off and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, sorry, we'll support you. And that was a lot easier. And then I'm in, you know, quite a senior role within the co-op group. And because of that, I ended up talking to more and more people about my decision not to drink, and started to run some workplace wellbeing sessions, like helping other people. And I just found I was inundated with people asking for support. So I did some sober coaching training. I went off and did the Sober Club coaching diploma, and I did an NLP practitioner certification for neuro-linguistic programming, which was fantastic, and started working with clients to help them stop drinking. And then from that, I developed the 101 Days to Sober program. But this workplace stuff was really calling to me, and I just wanted to help more people than I could on a one-to-one basis. So I set up a peer support network across the co-op, which was called, and still is called, the Sober Curious Society. And lots of people said to me, Janet, this is not going to work because no one will want to talk about this at work. It's too taboo. But they did. So I had 78 people in the first meeting. And it just grew and grew, and it's become a real force for good. And so many people have sent me emails and messages saying that I'm the reason that they've stopped drinking. And even though they might have been to the groups and never said a word, they've just sat and listened. They have just had that inspiration, that spark, that initial first bit. They've gone off and they've looked at the materials that I've put out, you know, my resources for the Sober Curious. They've listened to podcasts, they've read Quitlit, and they've got themselves to a point where they're sober. And they write to me like a year later and say, it's my 1 year soberversary today, and it all started with a talk that you gave at the co-op. And I have no idea that, you know, even who they are really, but they write me these emotional letters, and I just think I just got to thinking there's more to this, you know, there is more to this. And I looked at kind of all the corporate wellbeing stuff that I'd ever been through, which is a lot. So physical health, mental health, yoga, mindfulness, nutrition, sleep hygiene, you name it, we have it on our workplace wellbeing program, and I go to all of it. And I, for years, I thought I was working on my well-being by going to all these things and doing all this well-being stuff, but I was still drinking like pretty much every night. So I'm literally just undoing it. It's like Control Z, undo everything every evening. There's just no point. So I kind of got the idea that this really should be incorporated in a more deep way into businesses. And I started working with organizations delivering alcohol talks as part of their workplace wellbeing agenda. And I expanded it into line manager training and some stuff around support for individuals and changing the culture, the drinking culture within organizations. And ultimately, what I created was an accreditation. So I own the sort of registered trademark for the Alcohol Safe Workplace Accreditation. And that is a set of 12 standards that an employer needs to meet in order to get the badge. It is not a simple tick box exercise. The 12 standards can be tricky for employers to get to, if I'm honest, depending on their starting point, but we help and support them through every step of that. And then what happens by the end of the accreditation process is they have a workplace that is safer. They have a much lower risk of accidents and incidents. They have lower costs from grievances. They have more psychological safety in the workplace. They have a workplace where people can ask for help and receive it if they need it. And they have a sober, inclusive workplace where not every single event is centered around alcohol. More people who are not drinking for religious reasons or because they're pregnant or for some kind of health condition. All these people suddenly start coming to workplace events who never used to come to the events, and their engagement scores go up. And there are lots and lots of benefits for employers of creating this more inclusive culture around alcohol. And I just love it. It's just so much fun. So yeah, changing the world one company at a time at the moment.
Well, I want to highlight the word "we" there, because I think that's one of the things that I find is particularly interesting about this accreditation. I mean, what you've done is just amazing. But to talk about the different people that you bring to bear on this accreditation, because I think that's super interesting.
Yes. So I have a panel of experts who help me. So when I was setting out the 12 standards, I obviously used my own experience of working with employers, but I also called upon, I reached out specifically to some people who I knew would be brilliant at helping me. So for example, I have Lauren Booker, who is a workplace alcohol consultant who's been doing this work for over a decade, and she works for Alcohol Change UK, the leading alcohol charity in the UK. She is an absolute expert, and she has kind of rubber stamped my accreditation, and she's put a name to it, and she's one of the panel. We have Janie Lee Grace, who has a 2 million download podcast called Alcohol Free Life. We have people in the panel of experts who have the UK it's called the CIPD. It's like the HR qualifications in the UK. So they're HR experts. We have people who are health and safety experts with the relevant UK accredited body certification. So we've looked at it from like quite a number of different angles and got those experts together. They have approved, they helped me to develop, and they approved the standards. And when an employer is ready for accreditation, it is the panel who assess whether or not they've met the standards, not me. And that keeps the commercials separate from the integrity of the accreditation and makes sure that it never becomes a tick box exercise or a money-making machine. It is a genuine, full spade deep cultural change for progressive organizations who really care about their people. I'm really proud of it.
It'd be, yeah, it's, it's, you just said for people that care. And here's the thing is that I think for a lot of people, they're completely ignorant. It's not, there's a lot of really good, caring people that don't know that they're walking amongst people like us that are in the middle of deep turmoil or the ones of us that have found our way to sobriety and we show up for the event and the champagne flutes get passed around and we flag down a glass of orange juice to like single us out as the, obvious person out. But, I don't know the statistics as well in the UK or other countries, but, the volume of people we're talking about here is a lot.
Yeah.
I've been at the company I work at for 12 years. And until I started my noisy work of being an outspoken advocate for this and stepping out of the shadows, I knew one person in my company.
Yeah.
That's how quiet we are. I probably shared with maybe 5. And since I've gotten loud, now I've got, 20 plus. Yeah. And we're just getting started, right? So let me just run a number by the audience. I'm now leading with the numbers a lot, and I'd love you to lean in on this as well, Janet. So in the US, it's roughly 1 in 10 people have an alcohol use disorder, aka has tried all the things, walking around in whatever level of suffering, outwardly or inwardly. And we're about 6% of the population is in recovery.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
1,000 people in a room, or whatever number you want, we're around there as well. So the volumes are big, right?
Yes, very big.
So we're not reaching out to a very small group. Will you speak to that a little bit as far as how you think about this work and how much impact it has?
Yeah, so I like to think of it as if you've got 100 people in a room in your organization. In the UK, we have quite a big vegetarian and vegan community. So we have about 13% of people who are vegetarian. We have about 5 or 6% who are vegan. We have about 10% who are gluten-free. And whenever there's a workplace event, there is definitely going to be food available for people who are vegetarian, vegan, and gluten-free. We have 20% of people, and that is rising. It's 25% amongst what we call Gen Z. That's 25%, and they don't drink alcohol, and yet there is regularly nothing on offer for those people at a workplace event other than warm orange juice and maybe a bit of fizzy water if you're lucky. And yet one of the fastest growing sectors in the food and drink market is alcohol-free drinks. There's a lot of people, as well as those 20% who are completely sober. You've got this huge growing market and this massive explosion of innovation in the alcohol-free drinks market, which is largely actually driven by people who are moderating, which is interesting. Now, whether they're moderating successfully or moderating like we tried to moderate, I don't know. I'm sure it's a bit of a mix. I do sometimes wonder if alcohol-free drinks have been freely available all through my life, if maybe I might never have run into trouble. But actually, I think that's probably not true. I always loved alcohol, so probably not. But it is interesting. And I just think employers are really behind on this, because a lot of people, let's face it, by the time you get to board level decision making, you're like probably 50 plus, and you're from that generation where everybody drank, and that drinking habit is so ingrained that you do not see it. It is a complete blind spot for you that there might be people out there who don't want alcohol at all the events. And actually, it might feel quite confronting, potentially. But there's a lot of people in decision-making positions in large organizations who are drinkers, who have just never noticed that this is happening around them. And those organizations are going to get a little bit left behind. They're going to start looking outdated. Young people, they're much more interested in great coffee, gym membership, really good quality food being served in the diner or whatever you've got in the workplace. They're looking for health benefits from their employer. They're not looking for a free bar at all. And employers who consistently use alcohol as the only reward are going to just start looking like dinosaurs. And they won't attract and retain the best talent.
That's a really great synopsis too, when you start bringing in the different use cases too, when you have vegetarians, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is like in those scenarios too, like where there's a lot of alcohol, like for me, my sobriety seems to be very solid.
Yeah.
Right? I'm okay navigating the world of drinking culture. Okay.
Yeah.
Not ideal. And in fact, I'll
Yeah.
remove myself. It's because it's not so much that I'm jealous. It's more that just uncomfortable to watch people get
Mm.
messed
Yeah.
up. I take care of myself. I
Yeah.
exit. But when you're newer,
Yeah.
right, or and newer is a relative term. Some people get a really rock solid start, and they're really, but relapse and
Yeah.
researching this is commonplace, and so you put it up front, and you got your boss there, and now everybody's taking a shot,
Yeah.
or the whiskey shows up in the mail for a job well done.
Yeah.
Now you've got
Yeah.
a scenario with somebody who's like starting towards that, maybe like you and me, they were on the moderation wagon, they were trying, and now
Yeah.
all of a sudden maybe they've put a week together and they're, or maybe it's a month, and now all of a sudden, well, yeah, but this is makers,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
great whiskey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I can't waste it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember being about 4 weeks sober and someone giving me my favorite bottle of wine, which is quite expensive and a luxury item. And my husband poured it down the sink, and I was really cross with him because it was a really good wine. And he was like, "But you're not drinking anymore." And I'm like, "I know, but somehow I was still so attached to it." And I'm really glad he did it. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm so glad that he did it because I 100% was going to drink it. I think that's why I was so cross, is because I'd made that decision to drink it. I just wasn't sure exactly when, but I was going to relapse by drinking that bottle of wine that someone gave me. I know I was. And so when he poured it away, I was like, it was very confronting for me and difficult. And I had a big tantrum, but it's what needed to be done. And do you know what? It would just have been so much easier if someone hadn't given me a gift of a bottle of wine, really. It was very unhelpful. They didn't know, but, we use alcohol as a reward. And I think we need to stop doing that. I really do. You wouldn't give someone a 200 pack of cigarettes, would you? Would you? I don't know.
Smoke up.
Gift wrap it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. But some of the other statistics that I think you might like. So 40% of all workplace accidents are alcohol or drug related. 40%, 40. So that's a use case in itself. And then when you couple that with some of the industries that have the highest rates of alcohol use disorder, they tend to be quite safety critical. So you've got like construction, you've got surgeons, you've got people who are in positions where they can endanger themselves and other people. There was a survey in the UK recently that showed that basically 10% of people admitted to having been under the influence of alcohol at work in working hours in the last 6 months, which is I think that's a really high number to be drinking at work. I mean, it might be 1 pint at lunchtime, but it might be more. Yeah. Are you okay with that as an employer? What about your data security? What about your health and safety? There's so many risks. 50% of sexual harassment claims involve alcohol. So if you are facing large grievance costs for sexual harassment, maybe have a think about alcohol policy at the same time. That is a very expensive process to go through. What else can I tell you? 3 out of every 4 people in the UK who are seeking help for alcohol use are in employment. So you imagine that these people going into alcohol services are like, drinking vodka in the morning and living on park benches, but they're not. They're working full time. They're holding down jobs. They've got children. They are paying their bills. They're working for you, and they're looking for help with alcohol use, and they're not asking you for it as the employer because they're embarrassed. They're going elsewhere for it. But as an employer, you are uniquely positioned to make that journey so much easier for them, and to destigmatize it, and to say it's okay to ask for help, and to provide social gatherings where it is okay for you not to drink, and where people don't ask you constantly why you're not drinking. And you provide something respectful for for you to drink at that event. And you also educate people about alcohol, what it is, how it works. You provide a policy that says if you disclose an alcohol use issue, we will first seek to support you before we seek to, discipline you for it. All of these things are within an employer's control, and they can just make such a difference to people's lives. Like, I do actually believe that the single biggest thing that can be done to prevent alcohol harm in the world is employers tackling this in the same way that they've tackled mental health. And hats off to employers for the work they've done destigmatizing mental health. It's time to take alcohol on that same journey now.
On LinkedIn the other day, Janet, I'd sent you that the White House here in the States had released this recovery ready workplace, which was a pretty amazing thing to see. I'd been watching for it for a while, and it was basically a call from the White House to corporate America to step up. And on your LinkedIn, I loved it. After I said that to you, your LinkedIn, you said, "I've been hacked. Joe Biden has seen my playbook." And because I looked at your playbook, the pillars and whatnot. So tell me more about what you saw in that document versus what you have done with your group. And I would love for you to play with that if you're up for it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I read it and I thought, wow, I loved it, actually. I think that it turns out that me and Joe Biden have a lot of shared ideas. Wow, who knew? It is almost as if he hacked into my computer, because he's coming at it from a slightly different angle. So he's talking really about drugs as well as alcohol. I do really just stay in my own lane and talk about alcohol. There's no reason why it can't be expanded out wider, though. And he is really thinking about getting workplaces to think differently about employing people who are in recovery, which, although I would encourage, I'm thinking more about helping people who are in that grey area before they've really reached their own rock bottom, helping them to get the support they need to stop drinking before things turn really messy, so that they don't need to go through recovery. I'm talking more about prevention. But having said that, the similarities are really interesting. So he is talking about having the right policies in place. I think that is the cornerstone. He's talking about having peer support groups. As I've said on this podcast, my peer support group is one of my favorite things I've ever done in my life. It's magical what happens when you open up a space for people to share their stories. It is just incredible what happens. Joe Biden in that paper is talking about culture and tone from the top. He's talking about decentralizing alcohol from events and creating recovery safe kind of environments for people that are not triggering, I guess. What else? He's talking about line manager training, which is something that is central to our accreditation. He's talking about education for the whole workforce. He specifically calls out like destigmatizing activity, such as lived experience speakers going into workplaces, and just kind of telling that story that addiction is something that can just happen to anybody. It's not that they're a bad person who went off and, deliberately got themselves addicted to something. It's something that crept up on them and they didn't see it coming. And that destigmatizing activity is going to be so important in getting people to reach for help. The similarities are like it is. I so welcome this coming out of the White House, because I was just reading it saying, yes, this is what we do. This is what we do with employers. This is what we believe employers should be doing. And I can't wait to see what happens in the States next, to be honest. I think it's going to really take off.
Yeah, I hope so. They're in the letter I think I sent you. You'll notice that I think they call out Google as the first company that's committed to becoming a recovery ready workplace. Their language.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and we haven't even, you and I have talked here in the first person for the most part. We haven't even expanded the scope slightly to all the families that are involved.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
just people close to us, but the parent of a kid, right? That's in the middle
Yeah.
of this stuff, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden it gets like a very large pool pretty
Yeah.
quickly. So to your point
Yeah.
earlier, in the corporate, well, I'm using corporate, but in the
Yeah.
workplace, the impact on the individual and
Yeah.
the impact on their families is
Yeah.
tangible, palpable,
Yeah.
available.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to call out as well.
Yeah, I agree. Some of the most difficult conversations that I've had with people since I've been doing this work have been the partners of people who are suffering, and they're just desperate to help, and they just don't know how to help, or they're hiding the fact that they're living with this at home from their employer because they're worried that they'll be in trouble because actually they're having to make a lot of phone calls home or go home at lunchtime and check on things. And they're just constantly living with this anxiety and anguish about a loved one who is suffering with an addiction, and being able to destigmatize that and actually put support structures in place. In the same way that if you had an employee whose partner had, a serious cancer, you would give them time off for appointments, or you would be compassionate about making adjustments so that they could look after their partner. There just isn't the same attitude when that partner is suffering with an addiction. And I would advocate that employers are really well positioned to make a massive difference to that. And actually, by providing those adjustments and enabling someone to provide proper care for someone who's in addiction, you're going to be so much more likely to be able to support that person and get them back on track than if it's all hidden and behind the scenes.
For sure. Yeah. And here's the other thing too, you and I are on this call, and probably the people that listen to us have their own life experience with addiction, either for themselves or their family members, and so they've got some stories that they've seen play out in front of them, and the stories that we're sharing are less prominent. I mean,
Yeah.
we're seeing some celebrities more and more. I think that's a super positive thing,
Yeah.
right? But for the most part, probably like you, I felt very unique. I felt very alone. I had no idea what would you say, the underground, what earlier?
Yeah, the underground movement of sober rebels.
And so you think about if you just normalize that and have those people around, you just can't. It's hard to know what happens because I haven't really seen it play out yet. But the meeting that I go to on the regular, because I have a chronic condition, I treat it. I don't mess around. I put my lucky socks on and I got to make sure that I'm in position to continue to remember that I can't be messing around.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In my main group, it's full of professionals. We've got a surgeon in there. We've got a pharmacist. We've got airplane pilot. I mean, that's the thing is these are not.
Yeah.
I mean, we get people that are way further down the rung in society terms.
Yeah.
But we're all the same, exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
We can't take a little bit of alcohol into us and do it. And then our families get to have the front row seat to what that looks like. And it's just a big, quiet problem that, people like us, I've heard it said recovering out loud. It seems to be this thing I'm seeing. I like that, right? No big deal. I've got this thing. So what?
Yeah. If everyone was able to recover out loud, then the stigma would evaporate.
Yeah.
Just go. Yeah. And I think that's what we're empowering, and it's starting to happen, and it's fantastic. I really do believe that we're on the brink of quite a big societal change across the Western world in terms of attitudes towards alcohol, in the same way that cigarettes are now seen as, something that's not the social norm anymore. I think that the tide is turning on alcohol, and these alcohol companies are not going to go down without a fight. And they are some of the most powerful organizations in the world. So, let's not be under any illusions about it happening overnight. But times are changing. They really are. That's because we're changing them.
Yeah. Well, and we're, and I'll tell on myself. So I'm the person that would have found this conversation very irritating.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh
so,
God, yeah, me too.
so, and as we get in front of people at different companies and whatever, I can see myself. I can hear my thoughts where I'm thinking during the time. But the way that my recovery has worked out is it's been a series of events. I call it straws in the camel's back over time, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's a straw, and you probably have these too, right, Jen? You're like, you remember something that happened a while back, and it hurt you, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But you probably didn't tell anybody, or maybe even you talked about it with your friends. Oh yeah, a bunch of garbage. That's my story.
Yeah.
And so I think in some ways, people like us are best positioned because we know what it's like to be on the other side of that. Not to say that other people can't deliver, but I think that there's something powerful about people who have walked in those shoes. Talk about that a little bit, if you would.
No, I think you're right. I think that if you want to change your drinking behaviors, you have to be talking to people who've done that. You cannot I would say you can't take any advice from drinkers because they'll tell you to cut down. Oh, excuse me. Oh dear. So they'll tell you to cut down. They won't tell you to stop because they're a drinker. It just doesn't work. And I think you've kind of got to have experienced that lonely, isolated place where you feel like you're a failure and you're the only person who has this issue and that everyone else can drink normally. And then you get it. Yeah. Once you've got yourself out of that, you can help someone else out of it.
And we wrap up the podcast. Thank you again, Janet. Great conversation. Thanks for the work you do. I'm going to be leaving for Thanksgiving here pretty quick, and I reflect back on Thanksgiving being an important day for me in that when I got sober in 2013, my 6-month anniversary of being sober landed right smack dab on Thanksgiving Day. And so it's always a nice reminder that to be grateful that I've found my way to sobriety and all the gifts that being a sober person gives me and all the pain that I get to avoid. And I'm super grateful. And if you're somebody who's in recovery or is, maybe even considering sobriety, I know the holidays can be tricky. So, reach out for help. There's all kinds of help available. Just open the phone book, go to an AA meeting, whatever. I'll put a bunch of links in the chat as well for those of you that are interested in finding out where you might be able to connect with others who are either trying to find their way to sobriety or maintaining sobriety. And be curious. Find out about it. We're not bad people. We have a condition that makes it so that we can't drink safely or use drugs safely, depending on what our drug of choice is. Wishing you all a great holiday season.